So if you're like me, you're probably disappointed with the release of Xiaomi's Mi A3. Even though it's got Android One, Xiaomi decided that Full HD was not necessary. They went with an HD screen on the A3, and they also did not give it NFC. So if you're someone that wants Full HD and AMOLED panel and a decent phone, then this is definitely worth a look. This is the Xiaomi CC9, and really this is what the Mi A3 should have been. And let's find out why in my review.
So I got this review loan unit from Trading Shenzhen. They include an adapter right here for you. So that's US to Euro for me, of course, because I'm in Spain. And then we get a USB to Type-C adapter as well from them included in the box. We have a TPU case, our 30-watt quick charge 3 charger, and a Type-C to USB cable. The phone weighs exactly 180 grams and is 8.8 millimeters thick. That is without the camera. So when you include that camera module, that then brings it up to 9.6 millimeters. The case is a smoky grey color and it offers protection for the buttons, all of the edges of the phone, including the camera lens on the back, because the case raises up just above the lens, so it won't touch any surfaces when placed camera down. So the back is covered with Gorilla Glass 5, it has curved edges and a good build quality to it. You can see we've got Xiaomi written here on the back. Now this is illuminated with an LED behind it, which isn't quite in the right position. I would have preferred a notification LED on the front of the phone where you would typically see it. And they are using a different font here for their Xiaomi, which I haven't seen before. So the cameras on the rear, we've got a 2 megapixel camera that's just used for depth information and the depth effect, then a 48 megapixel Sony IMX586. It's a very common sensor now, but it also is a very good sensor that does bin photos by default to 12 megapixels. The lens on this is 1.79 aperture, and then we have an ultra-wide 8 megapixel camera, which is great to have. I myself love my ultra-wide cameras. And a dual-tone LED flash. The SIM tray on the left-hand side does have a gasket around it. It will take 2 nano SIMs or micro SD card and nano SIM. The phone has an alloy frame around it, which is painted. We do have an IR transmitter, secondary mic used in voice calls for noise cancellation and in video, and then a 3.5mm headphone jack. Now this 3.5mm headphone jack offers some very decent audio. It might not be the loudest I've heard, but certainly the quality and the clarity that comes out of this jack happens to be right up there, I think. On the bottom, you'll find 2 grills, so one houses the microphone, the other the loudspeaker. There will be a sample in this video, and you can see just 2 antenna lines. On the right, our volume and power buttons. Now these are made of metal, they do not rattle, and they have some good feedback from them. You can see another antenna line there, right on the top right-hand corner. And up top of the phone, you will find an earpiece and the dewdrop that it has for a notch. Now this front-facing camera, it is 32 megapixels with an f2.0 aperture. And the bezels you can see with the 6.39 inch screen, they are quite minimal, good chin on it, good left and right bezels, and the top bezel as well is not bad. It does have quite a Mi 9, Mi 9T look to it, and the K20 Pro. So all of those phones do look very, very similar, and this is using a Samsung AMOLED panel. And a closer look there at those bezels. So the gamma is approximately somewhere between 2.3 and 2.4. We have a maximum brightness of 600 nits with this AMOLED panel. And I do find that it is a good panel, and as mentioned, I like the coating that they have used on top of the screen. It's not picking up fingerprints, hardly any at all, and it feels very smooth to the touch. Now depending of course on how you have the screen configured with the white balance, it does look quite good. And the photos, yes, can be saturated when you look at real world images, and the blacks are deep being an AMOLED panel. Overall, it's a quality screen that they have used in this, and I have no issues with this one whatsoever. And nowadays, most mobile screens are pretty damn good. So I'll demonstrate the face unlocking now. Tap the button, look at it, and you can see a little tick. I do have it set in the settings. I still need to actually swipe to then unlock. And I will demonstrate too, of course, that fingerprint reader. Now I find it to be a little bit slower than I would have thought it would have been. A little bit slower than expected. Maybe it's because I'm so used to my P30 Pro, which is quite quick for an optical fingerprint scanner. This one, you can see, does take a little bit over a second or so. It's still fine, it's still acceptable. It's just not going to be the fastest out there. So the phone ships with Xiaomi's MIUI 10. It is running a custom ROM here, so it's a Chinese phone, but this one, at least from Trading Shenzhen, does come installed with the global ROM. So that is good, you're going to get all your languages. So I wanted to talk like I always do, a little bit about the performance here, that I'm using the full screen gestures, and for the most part, I'm not seeing the typical stuttering that you do see with full screen gestures on a lot of Android phones. It has been a bit of an issue in the past with Xiaomi, but I must comment here to say that it has improved, and performance overall of the Snapdragon 710, seems to be very fluid and snappy for the most part. Sometimes I have noticed that when you are in some of the settings menus and you go through things here, you can sometimes see, depending on where you are, a little bit of lag just in the menus with scrolling, and it's almost as if it's not running at the 60 Hertz, but something a little bit lower. So this phone does have your DC dimming on there. That's in the settings under display. I will just very quickly show you that. A lot of people are interested in that. So it's the anti-flicker mode, which might help with some people sensitive to seeing flickering on screens. You can adjust, of course, the text size, the scaling as well. That's all changeable, and the contrast in colors is your typical menu here. So keeping it on the automatic contrast, well, that's the setting you get with by default, but I actually do prefer standard, which looks a little bit more correct to me. So overall, the ROM is quite fluid. It is snappy. I'll just demonstrate quickly Twitter as well, load that in. I'm currently on data here at the moment, and you can see you get the typical caching loading lag to begin with, and there it is, quite smooth multitasking. Sometimes with those full screen gestures, when you bring it up, you will see a few stutters. So there's my typical things I want to run through here as well. I've taken a few screenshots. So when you originally get it, you're going to have these apps pre-installed. So it's minimal on the bloat. The Chinese versions have a lot of bloat, but not right here. You get a lot of Google bloatware on there. Some apps that you probably might not need, but the good thing is, of course, that you can just uninstall those if you don't want them. So for free space on the 128GB version I have here with 6GB of RAM, you get 115GB free. It doesn't support Widevine Cert Level 1. Unfortunately, you can see here Security Level 3. So Netflix, Amazon Prime is just going to be stuck in standard definition. That is something they need to fix. So another thing they need to fix as well is this. This is an advert that pops up with the cleaner app. So this is some of the stock apps, some of Xiaomi's apps that are on there that you will find. In fact, the deep cleaner one also will have ads. If you go up here and you hit deep cleaner or security scan, these apps up here is where you're going to find these adverts, which to me is completely unacceptable. I know there have been people defending Xiaomi's choice, saying they only have a margin of 5% profit. They need to make money, their software team somewhere else. It's 2019. It doesn't even matter what year it is, actually. They should not have adverts there at all. At least they're not inappropriate this time, showing me adult dating sites. Camera 2 API support is not level 3, but full. This is still good. And here is the internal storage. So there is some misinformation out there saying that it's 128GB of UFS 2.1 storage, when in fact it is eMMC 5.1 spec. So we're getting reads there of about 476 and sequential writes of 191. And here is the Antutu score for those interested. So Snapdragon 710 with the Adreno 616. These are the scores you can expect here from it. So, it's not the fastest. This is a mid-range chip. GPS is working well. It doesn't see a huge amount of satellites. So some phones can get up to 36, 40 even. But it still does work well, follows you around good. Accuracy will hover somewhere between 4 mostly and 3 meters. Wireless performance, not the fastest, and this is to be expected. So when I have the Snapdragon 855 mobiles, you're going to get almost triple this speed right here, but it's still decent for what it is. No issues with the range, the performance. I tested in various different locations here in the studio. It is working well. Same goes with 4G speeds with my carrier. I'm always getting somewhere around this speed here, so no problems there with that. So the battery life is something too that I wanted to point out. Now that I have had this phone for quite a few days, I can point out that I'm running GSAM here in the background. Wow, it doesn't actually seem to be there. And I'll just quickly launch it and show you exactly what you can expect. I'm about 7.5 hours now into it. You can see I have 34% left. So I do believe you're going to see somewhere between 8 and 9 hours of screen on time. So this is approximately 60% on wireless, the other 40 being on data. So because it does have the global ROM, in fact it's an official global ROM, we do have Google Play Store already installed here. You don't need to mess about with trying to get it installed like you have to do with the Chinese ROMs. Onto audio, so it's just got the single loudspeaker here at the bottom. It doesn't act as a secondary loudspeaker, the earpiece, unfortunately, but this speaker doesn't sound too bad to me. In some scenarios where I've been watching content from YouTube, I find that it could be a little bit louder, but for the most part, I'm finding that there's a decent loudspeaker. There is some bass to it, and the audio quality as well with voice calls, good, no problems. I've made a few calls on it now, I think about 10 minutes or so, and I've had no issues with its quality. But here is a sample of that downwards firing loudspeaker. So gaming performance, the Snapdragon 710 handles Full HD Plus gaming just fine. You will see some stutters and the occasional lag, things caching in. I have noticed though with Elder Scrolls Blades, that's probably one of the more demanding games you can get on Android at the moment, that it will tend to get quite choppy at times with a lot of volumetric lighting on the screen. With this one, this is Shadowgun, 60 frames per second with the auto graphics setting, which I believe is low. It is running, as you can see, very smooth, very fluid. Same goes with PUBG. All of those new titles out there, they're going to run just fine on this particular chipset. So before I show you the video samples taken on these cameras and photo samples, I'll just quickly run through the app. So it's pretty much the same as previous versions, but there are a couple of new additions. So the portrait mode, that does have reasonably good stitching. They seem to be improving with every single update. But we now have these emojis, so it's their own version called, of course, Memoji. And if I swap over to the front-facing camera, well, here you can select what you want. So if I want a pig face, and you'll see now that my face becomes this talking pig head thing. So yeah, that's good for younger kids or whatever. If you're into that, I will never be using that myself personally. So we do have a night mode, and as you see from my samples, if you don't crop in, it might look semi-okay, but when you zoom in, it's pretty bad, the quality. In fact, it's terrible compared to other manufacturers like Google, Huawei, but of course there will be, and probably is, I think, already a Google camera port for improved night shots. But here are those samples. I'll start out with video and later, of course, camera samples. So this is the 4K video setting that I'm using right now, and you'll notice that even though I do have the stabilization active, it doesn't seem to be working at all because the footage is still a little bit shaky. So hopefully they can fix this. 1080p, it is working. At least you do get the stabilization then if you want it. And you probably would have noticed too that the audio is actually better. They have improved the bitrate here. Hopefully they don't take this away with a further firmware update, because that happened before with the Mi Max 3. One update we got the good audio, the high bitrate, and then about a week later it was removed due to another update coming through. So hopefully it's not going to happen with the CC9. So this is the front-facing camera. You get 1080p max. The quality is good for 1080p, but of course it is lacking electronic image stabilization, which I hope Xiaomi will one day enable with the front-facing camera. After all, the rear camera with the 1080p can do it. I don't really see why they can't do it with this front-facing camera. Other manufacturers can as well, and that improved audio quality, as I mentioned, it is obvious to my ears at least, and let's hope it stays and remains this way. So this is good, but you're going to really need a gimbal if you want nice steady footage. The crop is not too bad. I'm actually holding my hand not fully extended out, which is probably about now. So overall the fixed focus too is in the optimal kind of focus range, as you can see.
right, so as you saw from those photo samples, that the night mode on here is very disappointing. Okay, when you see it on the phone, you go, oh, that's actually captured a lot of detail, looks all right. But put it on your PC, put it on your Mac, crop in a little bit, and you just realize it's a big blurry mess. And of course, I was shooting handheld. If you use a tripod, it might be a little bit better. And what's that?
Gcam.
Oh, I can already hear people typing away, saying
Gcam.
Gcam. Yes, all right, Google Camera. If you want your night sight photos and you want better night photography, of course, get that port, put it on there, and then you can get all the benefits of that right there. So the video 4K lacks stabilization even though it's enabled. However, the audio that I've always been whining about all the time that Xiaomi just doesn't seem to want to fix, at least on this global ROM that this has, we have 192 kilobits per second audio instead of the typical 96. It doesn't sound quite as scratchy to me, and it definitely has improved the quality. So maybe Xiaomi are listening, but they still have the adverts in the ROM. Certain applications will bring up those adverts, but I haven't seen any inappropriate adverts at least. But it's not always there, and different regions will have it worse than others. I know India, pre-installed bloat app comes through. A few applications, you get even more apps there. So I really hope that Xiaomi, I think, well, they did actually mention that they were going to tone down or fix the inappropriate adverts, but hopefully they're going to remove them altogether, because I don't believe that the phone, you're paying for it, why should they be still generating revenue off adverts? I mean, other manufacturers aren't doing that, so hopefully they don't join them and do that as well. We don't want to see that. That is really the only bad kind of things with the phone. Now, me being real picky, okay, fingerprint unlocking speed, a little slow at times, well then it was actually very good. But that's just very, very minor. Now it doesn't have your DRM level 1 cert, unfortunately. So if it does have it, then of course we could see Netflix in full HD, Amazon Prime full HD streaming. But probably a lot of people won't even really care about that because, well, myself, I don't watch full episodes normally on a mobile phone, unless of course I'm stuck somewhere and I'm on an airplane or something like that, but then I wouldn't have wireless anyway, so not really a massive issue, but I hope that they can get level 1 cert with the global ROMs soon there. So performance-wise of the ROM, it is 95% of the time fast and fluid and smooth, but I have noticed that sometimes you get a little bit of choppiness and lag with the full screen gesture, so it's almost fixed, but it sometimes is there. It's just not every time. I just see it a little bit. I've noticed that sometimes when you swipe, as well, in the home screen, you will see just a couple of little tiny micro stutters there. A lot of people won't even be able to detect it. So overall, battery life, I think you can get up to at least 8 hours, 10 hours of on-screen time. Standby battery drain, I wanted to mention that as well because I forgot to mention it when I did my clip. I left it overnight at 60%. I came back and it dropped to 91, so 9% battery loss on standby there, connected up with just my data on. Is not really the greatest there, but I mean, it's still reasonable. It's okay there. So charge time too is about 1 hour and 25 minutes. It is fast. So overall, this is a very good phone. This is what I said at the start of the video. This should have been the Mi A3, this exact hardware, just of course with Android 1. So if you don't mind MIUI, go for this phone for the 250 or so euros it's selling for. You get the 6 gigabytes of RAM, 128 gigabytes of storage, and a really good screen, a really good package. Decent photos, as you saw, daylight photography, very good. You can get some really sharp, great photos. Thanks to that sensor, pixel binning from the 48 down to the 12 does seem to make quite a bit of a difference, and you get some really good photos out of this. Portrait mode stitching as well is good. So overall, it comes recommended from me. Thanks so much for watching this review, and I do hope to see you back in the channel. And if you are new here, and you like this style of review, then please do like and subscribe for more from me. And I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye for now.